It was a rainy afternoon when Lila, a curious and imaginative 10-year-old girl, decided to explore her grandmother's attic. The attic was a treasure trove of old memories, dusty photo albums, faded dresses, and forgotten trinkets. But something caught her eye, a small ornate clock tucked away in a corner. The clock was unlike anything Lila had ever seen. Its golden frame shimmered faintly, even in the dim light, and its hands moved in a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. The numbers on the clock face were written in a language she didn't recognize, and in the center was a tiny, intricate keyhole. As Lila picked up the clock, she felt a faint hum, as if it were alive. She turned it over and found a small, rusted key tied to the bottom with a faded ribbon. Her heart raced with excitement as she inserted the key into the keyhole and turned. At the moment she did, the room seemed to hold its breath. The clock's hands stopped moving, and for a split second everything around her froze. The dust in the air, the sound of the rain outside, even the creak of the old wooden floor. Then, just as quickly, everything returned to normal. Lila blinked, unsure if she had imagined it, but the clock's hands were now moving backward, slowly at first, then faster. She gasped and quickly turned the key again, stopping the clock. Her mind buzzed with questions. What was this clock? How did it work? And why was it hidden in the attic? Little did Lila know, this was no ordinary clock. It was a magical device, crafted by a mysterious clockmaker long ago with the power to control time itself. And now it was in her hands. After discovering the clock's strange behavior, Lila couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with possibilities. What if the clock really could stop time? What would she do with such power? The next morning, she decided to test it. She waited until her grandmother was busy in the garden and the house was quiet. Holding the clock tightly, she inserted the key and turned it slowly. As the key clicked into place, the world around her seemed to pause. The ticking of the kitchen clock stopped mid-tick. The birds outside froze in mid-flight, their songs silenced. Even the breeze through the window seemed to stand still. Lila's heart pounded as she stepped into the living room. Everything was frozen. Her grandmother's teacup hovered in mid-air, steam curling motionless above it. She waved her hand in front of her grandmother's face, but there was no reaction. It was as if time itself had taken a deep breath and held it. Excited and a little nervous, Lila decided to explore. She ran outside, where the world was equally still. A butterfly hung in the air, its wings spread wide. A dog mid-bark stood frozen on the sidewalk. She giggled, feeling like she was the only person alive in a world of statues. But as she wandered, she noticed something strange. The longer time was stopped, the heavier the clock felt in her hands. It began to hum faintly, as if warning her. Reluctantly, she returned to the spot where she had started, turned the key again, and watched as the world sprang back to life. The birds resumed their songs, the teacup landed gently in her grandmother's hand, and the dog's bark echoed down the street. Lila felt a mix of awe and unease. The clock was magical, but it also felt alive, as if it had a will of its own. Still, she couldn't resist the temptation to use it again. After all, what harm could it do to stop time for just a little while? Over the next few days, Lila couldn't resist using the clock. She began to see it as a tool to help people, even if they never knew she was behind it. One afternoon, she saw her neighbor, Mr. Thompson, struggling to carry groceries up his porch steps. His arthritis made it difficult for him to move quickly, and a bag of apples tumbled to the ground. Lila quickly turned the key on the clock, freezing time. She ran over, picked up the apples, and placed them gently on his porch. She even rearranged the groceries to make them easier for him to carry. When she started time again, Mr. Thompson blinked in surprise, wondering how the apples had magically returned to his bag. Another time, she saw a little boy crying because his ice cream had fallen to the ground. Lila stopped time, ran to the ice cream shop, and bought him a new one. She placed it in his hand just as time resumed. The boy's tears turned to laughter, and Lila felt a warm glow of satisfaction. She even used the clock to help her grandmother. One evening, her grandmother accidentally burned a pie she had been baking. Lila stopped time, removed the burnt pie, and replaced it with a fresh one from the bakery down the street. When time started again, her grandmother smiled, thinking she had somehow saved the pie herself. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Lila felt like a secret hero, fixing small problems and making people's days a little brighter. But as she used the clock more often, she began to notice strange things. The clock's hum grew louder, almost like a whisper she couldn't quite understand. Its hands sometimes moved on their own, even when she wasn't using it. And every time she stopped time, the clock felt heavier, as if it were weighing her down. One day, after helping a friend at school, Lila noticed something alarming. When she started time again, her friend's memory seemed fuzzy, as if she couldn't quite remember what had happened. Lila's heart sank. Was the clock affecting people's memories, or was it doing something even worse? She tried to brush off her worries, telling herself she was just imagining things. But deep down, she knew the clock was more powerful and more dangerous than she had realized. Lila's unease about the clock grew as strange things continued to happen. One morning, she stopped time to help her grandmother find her lost glasses. But when she started time again, her grandmother looked confused and muttered, "I could have sworn I left them in the kitchen." Lila realized the clock wasn't just stopping time. It was altering small details like memories and events in ways she couldn't predict. The clock's behavior became even more erratic. Sometimes, when she turned the key, time would stop, for only a few seconds before starting again on its own. Other times, the clock's hands would spin wildly, and Lila would feel a strange pull, as if the clock were trying to take her somewhere. The once gleaming golden frame now had faint cracks, and the hum it emitted sounded more like a warning than a whisper. One afternoon, Lila decided to test the clock one last time. She stopped time to help a boy who had fallen off his bike. But, as she reached out to help him, the clock suddenly grew icy cold in her hands. The world around her flickered, like a broken film reel, and for a moment, she saw glimpses of a different reality, a world where time had been twisted and broken. Terrified, Lila turned the key to start time again, but nothing happened. The clock was stuck. The boy remained frozen mid-fall, and the world stayed eerily silent. Panic set in as Lila shook the clock, trying to make it work. The cracks on its surface grew larger, and the hum turned into a deafening roar. Finally, with a desperate twist of the key, time started again. The boy fell to the ground crying, and Lila rushed to help him. But as she did, she noticed something even more alarming. The boy's scraped knee healed almost instantly, as if time had reversed itself for him. Lila's hands trembled as she clutched the clock. It wasn't just stopping time anymore. It was bending it, breaking it. That night, Lila had a vivid dream. She saw the clockmaker, an old man with kind but sad eyes standing in a workshop filled with broken clocks. He spoke to her without words, his message clear. The clock was never meant to be used so carelessly. Every time you stop time, you unravel the fabric of reality. When Lila woke up, she knew she had to make a choice. The clock was no longer a tool for helping others. It was a danger to everyone and everything she loved. Lila knew she couldn't keep using the clock. The cracks on its surface had grown deeper, and its hum now felt like a constant, unsettling presence in her mind. She thought about all the good she had done, helping her grandmother, saving the boy from his fall, making people smile. But she also remembered the flickering glimpses of a broken world and the clockmaker's warning in her dream. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lila made up her mind. She took the clock and climbed to the top of the hill behind her house, where the sky stretched wide and the stars began to twinkle. She held the clock tightly, feeling its weight and the faint vibrations of its power. "I know you're special," she whispered to the clock, as if it could hear her. "But you're too dangerous. I can't keep using you." The clock seemed to resist her decision. Its hands spun wildly, and the hum grew louder, almost pleading. For a moment, Lila hesitated. What if she needed it one more time? What if there was an emergency? But then she remembered the boy's healed knee, the flickering reality, and the clockmaker's sad eyes. She knew she had to let go. With a deep breath, Lila turned the key one last time. But instead of stopping time, she twisted it in the opposite direction, further than she ever had before. The clock's hum turned into a soft, melodic chime, and its golden frame began to glow. The cracks on its surface mended themselves, and the hand slowed to a gentle stop. A warm light enveloped the clock, and for a moment, Lila thought she saw the clockmaker's face smiling at her. Then, with a final soft chime, the clock dissolved into a shower of golden sparks that floated up into the night sky, joining the stars above. Lila felt a mix of sadness and relief. The clock was gone, but the world felt right again, balanced and whole. She sat on the hill for a long time, watching the stars and thinking about the lessons she had learned. Time was precious, not because it could be controlled, but because it moved forward, carrying everyone and everything with it. When she returned home, her grandmother was waiting for her. "There you are, Lila," she said with a smile. "I was wondering where you'd gone." Lila hugged her tightly. "I was just saying goodbye to something important." Her grandmother nodded as if she understood. Sometimes letting go is the bravest thing we can do. And as Lila went to bed that night, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The clock was gone, but its magic had taught her something even more valuable. That every moment, every second was a gift to be cherished.